Whoa, buddy. Put that thing back in its holster. We haven't gone anywhere.
I don't understand.
Check out the MichaelDukesShow.com for information on how to get access to the podcast.
Welcome to the party, pal.
The Michael Dukes Show.
The greed and the entitlement is astounding to me.
What more could you want from a low-budget radio program?
This is a dumpster fire.
That was just BS.
It is time to get a new perspective.
We know just what you need, and we've got just the cure. Open wide and prepare for a steaming hot cup of freedom.
I just don't fathom it.
The Michael Dukes Show, streaming live across the world.
Oh, yeah. Live around the world on the internet at MichaelDukesShow.com and across the state of Alaska on this, your favorite radio station and or FM translator. Good morning, my friends, and welcome back to the program. It is the Hump Day edition of the Big Radio Show. Wednesday, ready to get onto that downhill slide to Firearms Friday. Wild weather going on down here. 28 degrees up here on top of the hill, on top of the world, in beautiful Homer, Alaska. 14 degrees up in the Anchorage area, between 15 and 20 degrees up in Matsu. Fairbanks is a little warmer, but boy, man, they got hammered with snow in the Anchorage area. Record highs for snow. It's record-breaking snow. Schools are closing early. The roads are a mess. I don't know. I was I was going to drive up to Soldotna today and decided to forego that trip because it's rain and snow this morning, then becoming freezing rain, and then rain and snow tomorrow, and rain and snow and rain. With temperatures hovering right around freezing on the highways, which sounds like a lot of fun. I mean, that just sounds like fun. Anyway, so here we are, ready to go, ready to dive into it for our big discussion. Today on the program, in hour one, we're going to be joined by Joshua McHoes, who is a fellow traveler in the libertarian mindset. He and I have known each other for several years, I guess, maybe coming on 10 years, where we've run in some of the same circles and talked a lot about the state and governance and where things go from here. He's written a Substack here last month, talking about Alaska being at a crossroads, and it's a great article. It's a great article setting the stage. I'm anxiously waiting for the next installment in this article. So we're going to talk with him about that today and get some takeaway from him on where we're at. So we're diving deep into the history of the state and where we're going from here and everything else. So after I read the article, I invited Josh on, and now we've got a chance to do that and talk with him here in hour one. Then in hour two, we're going to be joined by a former state senator, now candidate for lieutenant governor, Mike Shower, who's going to come on board and hopefully give us some details on where his campaign with Bernadette Wilson is sitting as far as the policies and discussions and choices and everything else. I'm anxiously looking forward to see where we're going with this. It should be an interesting discussion here today. We should have a nice chat about all things state related this morning. Then on the program tomorrow, I'm hoping to have Ben Carpenter on tomorrow. But in hour one, I know I'm going to want to talk about a couple different things, including the latest push by the corporate cronyism complex. Ooh, that's C3. I like that. The corporate cronyism complex. Talking about getting state money out to make sure that they get their lollipop for the year. We're also going to talk about the challenge to the ranked choice voting ballot initiative that is being led by none other than our good friend Kathy Giesel, and we'll talk about that as well. That's tomorrow morning. All right. But we got to get into it for today. So let's jump straight over there and see what's going on. Josh McHoes is in the green room, and I think we should get started and talk about his article, which is over on Substack. I've linked the Substack article in the chat room. Just look for Joshua McHoes, MCHOES, on Substack. And the title of the article is Alaska at a Crossroads, Part 1. Joshua McHoes joins us this morning to talk about that and then some. Good morning, my friend. How are you? How are you?
I'm doing good.
Thanks for coming on board and talking with us about this. I read this article again, Brian from the Common Sense Corps, providing me with some great reading material, and he dropped this in my box, and I was like, wow, this is a good foundational discussion for where we're at here in Alaska and where we're going from here. So, but first and foremost, Josh, before we get into the article, tell folks a little bit about yourself, who you are, where you come from, and then we'll get into the genesis of this article.
So, of course, I won't give you my long life story. I'll try to keep it brief to the most, pertinent information. So my dad came up in the military in the 80s. That's what kind of brought us this direction. He moved back to the lower 48 after getting out. That's a whole other story. And then we came up in the March of 96, and it's been history after then. Since then, I moved here when I was 3 years old, and to Cordova, Alaska. My dad got a job at, I'm trying to remember what it was called, North Pacific Seafoods, back when it was still in operation. And he was the plant manager there. And then as I grew up, I became an electrician under him, learned the trades, worked all over the state at Alaska commercial grocery stores, and then also did a bit of courthouses and fish processing plants, and even so I kind of built my history is just building Alaska, keeping it running. And then after that, you'll probably ask me like how I got down to Liberty Travels is so I'd see everything going on in the state and just observing people. Most of the facilities that I would be working on were often in operations, and so I couldn't help but watch people and I'm a type of person that pays attention to incentives a lot, and I just would consistently see the mismatch. And so here we are today. You've been writing,
you're writing on Substack, which again is the new, boy, I got to tell you, Substack is like the new hotness. We've got Sarah Montalbano, who comes on the program, Greg Sarber over at Seward's Folly. I know Kevin McCabe writes on Substack. Substack is like the new destination for people who want to do some deep writing, and I really enjoy perusing some of the discussions over there. Let's talk about the genesis of this article, which again is entitled "Alaska at a Crossroads, Part 1." What encouraged you to write about Alaska specifically, especially from your liberty-minded point of view?
So I was last spring, I was working for none other than Senator Bill Wilkowski down in Juneau as his intern. And I had to do some research for my legislative internship. And one of my other classes that I was also taking was Arctic and Northern Politics. And so I did a bunch of research that led me to making a very large paper. And then I realized, well, this is not digestible to the common man. And, because it was more academic and everything. And then I realized, well, I talked to people and they're like, you need to get this story out here. And working with. So I was also a state when I was at UAA. I was a state coordinator for Students for Liberty, running a student org there. And so consistently, it's like me looking at the institutions of how this whole state works, just everything, how everything interplays, be it from, our public education system to our state education system, to the university, to the PFDE and everything. And so, so during that research, I read a lot by Jay Hammond and Wally Hickel, which I think they're great minds, but of course everyone has their things where I jump off board with, where I disagree with them. And so it's the same thing that we're seeing today. There's a lot of great ideas going around, but often my view is that we need to keep that North Star, which of course is individual liberty.
It's interesting that you were doing work for Wilikowski, who a lot of us feel like not necessarily a friend of liberty or smaller, more limited government and everything else. That must have been educational to be part of that team.
Absolutely, that's what I took it as. Is that I was like, I'm here to learn. I'm here to learn how the institution works. I'm here to learn from someone that's been in there 18 years. He's been in the office for like 18 years, and my genesis into politics was about 15 years ago. So it was around the same time I got involved, started getting interested. I was like, okay, he has generally just the longest, institutional knowledge that's actually still coherent and I could actually work with. I looked at all the offices. I was like, okay, I know that I'm not gonna, if I was trying to get to a higher office, I probably would not be that useful. And so that was the whole thing. And it was a great office. I learned a lot. Yes, I disagree with Bill on some things. But, I understand that we have different modes of getting to the same place sometimes.
Right. The author's note at the beginning of the article kind of lines out what you're trying to do here. You said, this is a multi-part series that you've been working on, and it's not academic analysis for its own sake, but it's a story about how Alaska became what it is today and why we keep circling the same political and economic crises and what it'll take to break that cycle. You've also included a lot of word-of-mouth stories, anecdotal stuff, and life experiences. Set the stage for us here in the very beginning of the story. We got to go to break here pretty quick, but give us a setting for this story to get things started.
So, 1 second. My brain because my mind has been on the next piece a lot this next week. I've been writing it heavily, and so I'll give that a quick what's it called?
Tease.
A tease, yes, a teaser. Thank you. That's the exact word. A quick teaser. That as you read the paper, the next page, next part will be on just Alaska's history, and that's prior to statehood. In my view, that's the area that has been widely overlooked. Most people, often, yes, people know it, but we don't think of that as like foundational to our state and how everything operates still today. And so I'll go into that. And then this is just basically, I kind of lay out the fact that since the founding of the state, it's that fact that we had the state's lands are locked up like 60% to the federal government, and every 2 years the tax regime is considerably, or it's almost every year, the tax regime for the oil companies is consistently changing, and that's kind of the what kind of, I guess, I outline in the first paper is that it's just that there's no like stability in the state economically. People don't have the ability to plan long term, and you know, and I've seen kind of this different, difference in the camps of what we think is adequate or even efficient governance in the state. And that's, I guess, where I will be going as well into, is being like, there's a clear line between people who, my opinion, see Alaskans as people to actually like empower, and then otherwise to see them as managed.
All right, Joshua McHoes is our guest. You can find him over at joshuamchos.substack.com. He's written this article entitled Alaska at the Crossroads. We'll continue this discussion with him here in just a moment. Don't go anywhere. The Michael Duke Show, common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. Back with more right after this.
If you missed the show, you can listen to it on your time with Dukes On Demand. Oh, and it's free. Like America used to be. Streaming live every weekday morning on Facebook Live and MichaelDukesShow.com.
Okay, we're in the commercial break right now. Josh McHoes is our guest. We're talking about his article. Josh, can you see the little timer there next to me? You see the little timer there next to my name? Okay. When that hits 0, we got to go back to the radio. So just keep that in mind as we're talking here. Here in just a moment. Brian said, it's amazing how quickly Substack has simultaneously evolved and devolved. I mean, it's interesting for sure. But there's some really good stuff out there. And I appreciate a lot of the stuff that we're seeing out there in Substack. Go ahead.
Yeah. And with Students for Liberty, they had their national programs manager had been pushing me to say, hey, you should write here. But then I also reached out to Brian Kaplan. I don't know if you know who he is. He's an economist that works at George Mason. He's like in the whole gambit of people who do research on public choice theory and all of that stuff. He wrote the book Myth of the Rational Voter, and he's also wrote stuff on open borders. So he's a lot of things that I absolutely agree with him on. And so he was writing on there. He wrote some more, I don't know, social commentary piece that I responded to, and then reached out to him, and then he republished one of my letters that I wrote on there. And I was like, if he's willing to republish what I'm writing, I need to be out here writing with him. I was like, okay, I have overlapping audience with him. And I'm like, well, in my opinion, I'm young, and there's no one really else going to take this mantle in my generation yet as someone, we have a few of us, but no one who's willing to actually get the ideas out there, in my generation too.
Yeah. Tell me a little bit about, again, Students for Liberty and you're moving in the libertarian circles here. How has that shaped your perspective, especially, being raised a significant portion of your formative time coming here in Alaska? How did that affect you?
How the Students for Liberty or the experience growing up?
The Students for Liberty and kind of the libertarian circles and things like that. How did that all come about?
So I grew up, of course, here in Alaska, seeing the same thing growing up, people being managed. And then I stumbled upon like some YouTube videos by this guy named Adam Kokesh, and he was like campaigning for the Ron Paul movement and stuff back in like 2008 era. And with him being a veteran and all that stuff. And then I joined the party, or got involved with the Gary Johnson campaign and stuff in 2016. And since then, of course, it's been like history. I just found that these were people that I agreed with. That the whole thing about the budgets being mismanaged, the adherence towards, making liberty our North Star. And then with Students for Liberty, there was just some organization that when I went back to school, to university, I knew there was an ecosystem of that supported students to run student organizations and get the ideas, in front of the next generation. And they have flown me all over the country, the world. Even I've gone to Mexico. I've gone to DC many times now, to DC for conferences, and they've given me professional development courses and stuff like that. And they're basically just an organization that develops the next leaders of liberty in all
Right.
aspects of society, and that's kind of their modus operandi.
All right. Well, we're about to rejoin. As you can see, let's get things going. We're going to continue. Josh McHoes is our guest. Again, you can go to joshuamchos.substack.com to get access to his writing. Please like and share, follow, ring the bell. Let's do it. Here we go. The Michael Duke Show.
The Michael Duke Show. Not your daddy. Wait, sorry. Not your daddy? Ooh, not your daddy's talk radio. Huh. Whew. I was scared for a second. Thought we were going down. Here's Michael Dukes and the show.
Okay, continuing on right now, hour one of the big radio broadcast. Joshua McHoes is our guest. He's writing over on Substack, and his article is entitled Alaska at the Crossroads, with a subtitle of Resource Sovereignty, Corruption, and the Future That We Are Not Talking About. So let's set the stage for us here, Josh. Walk us through this article. Alaska, we're the last frontier. We've got beauty, we've got resources, we've got a lot of stuff. But it's interesting to see that this goes all the way back to well before statehood, well before the oil pipeline boom, and talks. You go all the way back to Gold Rush days as part of the setting the stage for this. Walk us through this.
So actually, I'm going even further back. So going back to even Russia and everything, how they managed us, and how it basically, of course, set us up for that. This is the norm. These are standard operating procedures. This is how the rest of the world sees Alaska. Is that, I kind of outline that we're treated like a colony, and everyone I know thinks that basically, outside of the state at least, thinks Alaska is still going well like it was in the 1980s. And we have everyone that moves up to the state, and then they find out it's absolutely the contradictory from what their view was, especially if they don't come from some moneyed past that actually can set them up well here. If you're trying to build yourself from nothing, most people are finding that it's almost, not almost, it is impossible if you're just starting from nothing here. I'm lucky to have family that's very supportive of me and what I do, and so I'm able to continue living here but I am also thinking, I don't know. I'm even myself, I don't want to leave, and there's a lot of us who absolutely do not want to leave, but we're seeing the sales tax being introduced at the state level. I know that we're probably not getting a PFD next year. You brought up yesterday, it's that this year, it's an election year. We're going to get some pittance. There's probably going to be $1,000, my assumption, because that's what happened last year. They already knew at the beginning of the legislature that we were getting $1,000 PFD last year. And so my assumptions, we're getting the same thing this year, just because, of course, like you said, it's an election year. It would be political suicide to not give us a PFD. And then, of course, there's, we see all the people coming already adamantly out against the governor's sales tax.
Mm-hmm.
And honestly, I see that as, actually just campaigning, not really actually looking at the full fiscal situation. I'm personally against the sales tax, but I do understand that even in how I outline is that, we do need some short-term fixes to turn us, like some things that might not sound so good, but as long as they specifically have sunset clauses, and I understand that can be changed, all of that stuff, but that's what we try to sell to the people is that, hey, this is our plan, and if they don't follow through the plan, you vote them out. But we haven't seen that people are willing to actually do that
Right.
as well.
You talk about how Alaska was treated as an extraction frontier. And as you said, going all the way back to Russia, the fur trade. Then we came to the gold rush. Then we came to the salmon fisheries. Then we came to, and you've got a phrase in here that a pattern that you mentioned that I really, it kind of resonated with me. You said each era repeated the same pattern. The wealth left and the instability stayed. Expand on that for me. I mean, you're talking about, you're talking about leaving. Other people have talked about leaving. People have come up for a boom and bust cycle. They make their fortune and they leave. But expand upon that instability and the wealth leaving for me.
So, of course, that's actually the constant conversation that's happened in basically here in Anchorage, the whole state. They're trying to capture the economic leakage that is leaving the state. They're saying, there's outside companies like Amazon, they're doing business here. And, I'm like, my view is these are all services. And we're, like, I just don't get the conflation with that the institutions are owed this money and that it's their responsibility to like pay these taxes. And then the same thing when people come here and leave. I'm like, my view is that we need to make it so that people want to stay here, and then when they come here they find that like the beauty and all of the things and the economic opportunity is what incentivizes people to come here, that it's so much easier to live here, you're so much freer and all of those things. Like we're saying about Alaska being the last frontier, that's kind of my view, is that we're not living up to our motto.
Right.
Like that's, I grew up here and I see the beauty and I see the ambition in Alaskan people. And, every time I've talked with someone, it's no matter from which side of political persuasion, they're just finding, it's the same feeling. They feel like they're managed. They feel like regardless of, maybe they think public schools need to be more funded. Maybe they think that, we again need more like more economic upward mobility. Both things mean that my mind is that people aren't given enough agency and that they're not being like, again, we're being managed. And I just do not think that within the next, honestly, 4 years, we're going to get moving in the right direction. I think things are going to get worse, unfortunately, but, hopefully that we can make some sense of, everything and figure out where we go after
oil, after
the crash, after after all the as we said, it's like, it looks like we're going to have an oil crash. But with the governor cutting the corporate income tax, I do get where he's coming from and trying to incentivize, more business to be more business friendly in the state. People are saying, oh no, this is going to decrease the amount of money coming into the state. And I'm like, that's the problem. Hopefully the sales tax actually gets people gets them to wake up and actually, like you said, get more involved with politics.
get
people
engaged. Yeah.
generally do not see the incentive to actually be involved because they're not directly affected. They're seeing a lot of people still feel, those that are well off, they're like, well, what's the point of me getting involved as much? Because, the PFD to them is essentially free money, but those that need it are like,
right. You mentioned that when oil arrived, it promised a lot of great things, jobs, growth, revenue, everything else, and that it changed things, but not in the way that people expected. And this goes back to that kind of that resource curse that we've talked about in the past, where we built an entire identity and economy on a volatile resource who we can't control. We can't control the price. We can't control the demand and supply and everything else. So talk to me about that.
So yeah, exactly. We've seen how, Trump just took out Maduro and how Venezuelan oil is now open on the open market. Basically I haven't checked what oil is at now, but I do know it dropped dramatically since then. And so there's that. That's the consistent thing, is that we thought, the whole framing years ago was that oil was going to stay high. It's going to be highly profitable. But of course, we can't manage global markets. We get to only respond to what's going on there. And, my view, so the often conversation, what made me often think about this as well, is from the people we generally disagree with, they keep making the comparison to saying we need to manage our state like Norway. And I did a part of my research was making that comparison, figuring out what did they do from learning from us, because that's the whole thing. Is in the 80s, or I think it was in the 90s, they came over to us, and because the fact they already had all their oil, they saw our PFD and were like, oh, this is a great program. How do we do something similar here? And what they did instead that we haven't done, like we keep bringing up, is they actually have considerably a spending cap. They actually limit the amount of money that comes in to the state, to their government, by about 3% every year. And so that actually gives their government a reasonable amount, knowing like they can estimate their forecasted budgets, all of that thing. And then downstream with, the fact that they know how people, the investors and businesses that develop oil in the state, know how that's all going to go. It creates, even rules that are stable, that actually make it that so that people can actually project out their long-term profitability to actually produce in that state, or
Right.
produce in that country. And so that's the problem again here. Every single year, they're considerably changing the oil tax structures.
Right.
And I understand why, but that's the same thing as like we saw with the Vico, we saw with 20 some years ago.
But have they really? I mean, I understand you're saying that there's a discussion on oil taxes probably every year, but you talk about it in the you even talk about it here in your article, the tax timeline. You got ELF, the economic limiting factor, which was the original tax scheme. That ran for 11 years. And then you have PPT, which ran for another 8-9 years, and then you had ACEs, which ran for about 7 or 8 years, and now we're in SB 21, which is going on year 12 now. So we're getting 12 years. So while there's discussions on it, the tax structure doesn't really change. How much of that is corporate PR versus what we're actually receiving? And as collective owners, you and I will agree that the collective ownership in this state is probably one of the biggest problems we have, even though that was the way it was set up. But we have to live under the regime that we have right now. But as collective owners, shouldn't we be fighting for the maximum return on a non-renewable resource? Shouldn't we be, as shareholders of the quote unquote corporation, shouldn't we be demanding that our board of directors, the legislature, get the maximum yield for our finite resource? I mean, shouldn't that be part of the discussion?
Absolutely. That's kind of where I'm getting at it too, is that, being the fact these are the rules of the institution we currently have, that's what we should be doing. Like this is a corporation that's supposed to be managed for us. We are the shareholders. And unfortunately, that's what people don't see it as, like, hey, this is a business, like we're investors by living here in this corporation that is known as the quote state of Alaska. I don't like the sounding of that. And the Permanent Fund Corporation. But again, we talked about you talked about the whole, we're bringing up the whole tax structure. The conversations themselves are market signals. That's the issue. Even though, yes, it considerably is a lot of PR, but people on the ground end up stopping doing business. And then we have the whole dynamic with the feds that keeps changing every 4 years. And so, the combination of the feds constantly changing the rules of the game, and then the discussion at the state level just sends signals to investors that it's not stable here, even though again, but it more quote is not stable, like you said.
Right.
And then they get to PR that like, oh no, we can't, actually produce here. And it's just like, well, they really don't know whether or not the tax regime is going to change. That's up in the air, even though they do often last that way and that long. And it seems that, functionally it does only adjust every 10 years and about on average, which shows like how often in my mind that the people are actually willing to actually consider that as, a shared sentiment as well. And again, it's just that they keep revisiting it. And
right.
It's like we should say that, hey, we're open for business, that we want things to be stable. If you're considerably just saying we want to tax you to essentially, in my opinion, to death, and that some people, there's a lot of people that, don't want oil to be produced here in the state at all. And I'm like, that's how our whole governance system works.
Right.
What
do you operate?
What do you actually want? How do you think Alaska should be managed? Because again, if you think that we shouldn't, I'm like, these people that say this, do they actually even understand how our state gets money?
No.
And I often view that like, okay, wait, they just want us to go back to an income tax and to a sales tax, and and I'm like, we don't have the population or tax, we don't have the population to manage, like to actually support our state. That's why the PFD and the permanent fund was even created, and in the first place. And that's why the state was set up the way it was, is because they knew that it's such a big state. It's going to be hard, even if we had a large population influx, that most of the state is almost uninhabitable unless it would take a long time for it to be developed.
Right. Well, and again, you're right in some of those areas, and the biggest problem is government is in the way in many respects. We're going to get back to this here with Josh McHoes. You can find him at joshuamchoes.substack.com. That's MCHOES. His latest article is Alaska at the Crossroad. We're going to continue discussions with him here in just a moment. Don't go anywhere. The Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio.
Running on 100% pure beard power. Oh, also some coffee. We dip our beard in coffee.
Nice beard.
The Michael Duke Show.
Okay, Joshua is our guest. and we're continuing in the chat room. Interesting that you bring up the fact that we always hear the Norway comparison and the sovereign wealth funds and the permanent fund and things like that. But it's interesting that you bring up the spending cap, because that's something that the legislature for years, decades even, has really been reticent to impose upon themselves. This ability to hold back the size and scope of government, the growth of government, because we know Parkinson's principle says, Parkinson's principle is for time, but Parkinson's principle for government is that government spending expands to consume all available monies, no matter how much we have, right there. And that brings Rob's question to the forefront. Senator Rob Meyer says, does maximum benefit for residents always mean getting the most money for government to spend? And that's been part of my discussion and talking points for years. That's how legislators look at it. Maximum money for them to spend. That's the maximum benefit. But if we could get access to cheaper, more affordable energy, to those resources for the use of the state of Alaska, doesn't that also play into the maximum benefit?
Absolutely. And of course, that's the whole idea of what we get back to the idea of what we think adequate or efficient governance is in the state, is that specific phrase was actually intentionally left vague, because they understood, probably understood that people deferred on what that actually meant. But again, I don't think that's what it should mean. Is that that we get the most government money available, because of course it would understandably considerably keep growing the state. And you mentioned, of course, brought back to Norway, was that they asked us after a long term of economic instability, and what we did to actually set ourselves up. And as they keep they were a social democracy, all of those things, but they economically liberalized in a way to actually make themselves what's the word? Friendly to business, friendly to actual investors. They understood that we need to not make,
right.
Not make not make big business our enemy. I don't get that whole framing. I mean, I understand that people view that, corporations have a disproportionate advantage because they have all this capital available to them. But often my view is that they just, the elephant in the room is the power that the state provides.
Right. Well, they gathered that capital by providing services and jobs and economics. I mean, you mentioned it earlier, when people have no connection to what's going on in government, they have no incentive to pay attention to it. I mean, that's been my concern here, is that the public and private economies are so disconnected because people just feel like it doesn't matter. You guys can do what you want. But we've reached that point in the road now where they don't have any more pots of money to draw from. And so now it's going to fall back on the citizens of the state of Alaska. And I mean, look, we're spending $20,000 for every man, woman, and child in the state, which is, I mean, the next nearest state is, I think it's Delaware, and we're spending, 30% more than Delaware is on their states, and places like Texas and Florida are spending a quarter of what we're spending on our citizens. Now, we've got geographic issues and everything else, but that just seems overblown, doesn't it to me? Doesn't it to you?
Absolutely. You mentioned a couple days ago, like a few shows back, how Alabama ended up, raising their test scores essentially since COVID, and ours have just dramatically dropped. And I was thinking about this last night at the assembly meeting as they were discussing the education levy, and I was like, sorry, the spending is that so since COVID, we've had that dramatic drop in testing scores and proficiency ratings, and they're saying that the school funding's not keeping up with inflation. I'm like, my mind, in keeping up with inflation, are they aware of what the average inflation was over the past 6 years in the long run? Because they understand that, generally the inflation rate when was projected is like just over the year or over the quarter. It's not this long-term trend. And we've seen actually inflation go up by like 40% in the past 6 years. And it's, I'm like, they're trying to, they keep mentioning that throughout every single,
Right.
level of government is saying that it needs to keep up with inflation.
Well,
And
again, but they're discounting all the one-time payments and everything else. They're talking specifically about one component of the budget. And that's part of the problem, is they give you a nugget of truth in this one little component and they ignore the rest. And that's where we run out. Hold the line.
Public enema number one. Oh, wait, sorry. Public enemy number one, which makes more sense. On the other hand, he's a little bit of a pain in the Michael Duke Show.
Yes, I am. A pain in the Michael Duke Show. Good morning, my friends. Welcome back. Final segment of this hour. Joshua McHoes is our guest. He's written the article, Alaska at the Crossroads, Part 1. And I've been waiting. You said next week, and that was like 5 weeks ago. So I'm in the end of the article. You said my next article next, and I'm excited to. I've been waiting patiently. So tell me a little bit about where we're going in the next article. Where are you taking us on this series of articles? Where are we going in this discussion?
So again, like I mentioned, the next article, I'm going to talk about the history that just laid the foundation, of our institutions, kind of what people thought was reasonable of how to manage Alaska and how to govern it through the time. And then, of course, then after the fact, I'll get into statehood. I'm thinking about getting into the Constitutional Convention, who the players are, what their backgrounds were, and understanding what were the minds, where were the incentives at in regards of how the state was actually, like, the Constitution was formed.
Right.
And then going on to being going into the oil years, talking about all of those people as well. And then go through, the different regimes, and then get to today and where I think that we should go. And so, again, that's the long-term trajectory of this paper. I realized, I set myself up to get things out a bit quicker than I thought I was able to.
Yep.
And that's the nature of politics, keeps pulling you every which way direction. There's so much going on all the time when you get in touch, get involved, when you actually start to see. And then I was also graduating around the same time from UAA, so had a lot going on, being like, okay, what do I actually have time for? And I also didn't realize how large this next segment would be, because I was like, okay, I should do this next segment some justice, because it's so overlooked. So that's also the reason why it's taken me basically a month to get this next piece out. And
yeah. Well, and that's okay. I'd rather have it be thorough and dedicated. We're just kind of chomping at the bit here for this. Joshua, we got about 4 minutes here, and we've talked about a lot of different things. And again, people should go out and read this article to get a little bit of a basic, to get a primer on what you're going to be covering here. But I guess my question to you is, if Joshua McHoes was emperor of the world or emperor of Alaska and could make any changes or do how would you set this up? I mean, because you talk about historically how we've basically been engineered really for failure with the extraction state and kind of the colonial aspect of it and everything else. If Joshua was God King for the day and could fix what's going on, what would you say? What should we be looking at? How should we be set up in a way that you would think would be the best?
So, of course, this will be a little bit of a spoiler towards the end for you guys. So my view, if we really want to get them, quote, maximum benefit for our oil resources, all the monies, essentially anything that, government thinks we should have, give it to the people, just like Milton Friedman said. Truly, we know what, if they actually think that public choice theory works, that people actually are rational actors and they know what they want, then wouldn't it be easier for just to give them money, and to see where it goes, and that we could actually fund our roads that way? I would say that I think the municipalities should take over a lot of the responsibility, even though I don't think they do a good job. I think they would do better rather than the state managing a majority of the things, because they don't have the local knowledge. They're not able to, they try to gather all of that, but then they get, there's all the differing competing incentives and everything, and competing what people actually want. So there's people out in the bush, and then there's people out in Anchorage, and we talked about the whole thing about school funding and everything. They get hundreds of millions of dollars out in the bush to build these schools that often I've seen them. It's this was built same thing 20 years ago, back when the projections for the state were good. We thought we were going to have a large population increase. That hasn't come. Families are having smaller, families are getting smaller. And that's not because people want to, essentially, in my view, too. We don't see it because of the cost of living. We don't see it that it's reasonable to have more kids. We have this, and that's the biggest frustration for me, is that people want to have certain lives, and they're not able to, just because they're just feeling managed and that they can't get ahead.
Yeah, we're being managed for sure. Joshua McHoes, our guest here. Again, you can find him at joshuamchoes.substack.com. He's got his first piece up there, Alaska at the Crossroads. I'm waiting on version 2 of that, part 2 of that. Joshua, thank you for coming on board and joining us this morning. We appreciate you coming out and being part of it with us, and we look forward to talking to you again here in the future.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Hold the line for just a second, Joshua. All right, folks, we got more coming up. Up next, it's going to be State Senator Mike Shower, former state senator who's now running for lieutenant governor. We'll see if he's got any solutions for us on all these big burning questions that we've been asking. We'll return. If you got to go, be kind, love one another, live well. We'll see you in hour 2. All right, Joshua. I wanted to give you a final bite at the apple here. Anything on this that we didn't cover or something you want to expound on? I want to give you the opportunity to take a couple minutes here to get it all out there, so to speak.
Okay, so we did mention the whole things about education, and so you said about how we spend it's $21,000 per student in the state. And Milton Friedman was famous for saying that, anything that the government provides that can be provided in the market is often going to be double the price. And we generally see that. When you look at what it costs to put your kid in private school in Anchorage, it's about $10,000 a year. They spend $21,000 on our kids in our schools. Same thing even happened when I went to a private school briefly in the Philippines when I in middle school, and they were even charging $5,000 a semester. Considerably, it looks like on the open market that it's about people will spend $10,000 a year for their kids in private schools, and that's where they're getting a very good education. Whereas when I had a very multicultural experience when I was over in the Philippines at this international school. They were teaching me things about world religions. I was getting access, exposed to all different languages. It was a very robust school. And then I come back home, and I have, went back to Cordova, and I had none of those opportunities I knew that I wanted to go into engineering after high school, which that changed, but they didn't have any physics courses. They didn't have any coding courses. And of course, this was before we knew, the big tech boom was, everything was there. Like we all saw these things happening. We saw, the rising of the smartphone, and I again, they say, oh, we have great public schools here. And I'm like, how many of these students actually feel like they're adequately, prepared for college if they choose to go do so? I understand there's people that don't want to, but isn't that like, what we're trying to produce is people that are actually educated, and to give them that choice that they're actually like, okay, I can either, if I don't want to go to college, at least I feel like I could go to college as well. But I had to take remedial courses at UAA because, again, I didn't have any physics courses of it, and then the same thing, I didn't have any coding courses back in the 2010s and everything. And I get that there's all these programs now, but then every year they end up using the sacred cows, be it the gifted programs or extracurriculars at the schools. And they say that, oh, our base needs of just being able to give people the skills to reading and math, those ratings are low and they keep dropping. And so that needs more funding. And then they say, we got to cut all these, the things that people actually have emotional attachment to. And every year this happens. And so
right.
I also wanted to add that last weekend, we had the Alaska Libertarian Party convention, and I was elected the communications director. So there's a lot of that. I'll also be, that's also a new hat that I'm wearing as well.
All right. Well, good stuff. Well, we look forward to, Brian says, thank you, Joshua. Also looking forward to the next part of the series as well. Can't wait to see it out there. We appreciate you paying attention and writing this stuff out. It's a very well executed first article, and looking forward to that second article. We appreciate you coming on board. Thank you for being part of the show today. And, look forward to seeing part 2.
Thank you.
All right. Appreciate you. Thanks so much. Thanks for coming on board. Joshua McHoes, our guest here on the program today. It's a very good article. You should go out again and look at it. Is that it? Oh, that's his Substack right there that I just posted to the chat rooms. And then everything is so slow this morning. And then this is the direct. Oops, that's not it. This is the direct link to the article that we were talking about this morning. So if you haven't had a chance to go out and read it, I recommend you do so and get a feel for what he's talking about there. All right, we're coming up on hour 2. We're supposed to have State Senator Mike Shower joining us here. I'm waiting for a response from him. He's supposed to be reaching out to me here. So we should be hearing from him here in just a moment. Please, again, like and share, subscribe, ring the bell, do all that stuff. If you want to help support the show and be part of it, you can also become a member of the Common Sense Corps, which is, again, another way to help support the show for as little as a cup of coffee, $3 a month, something like that. You can be a member of the Common Sense Corps as well. All right, we're going to be candidate. I'm talking to myself, LT, governor. All right, so we're going to be jumping into this here in just a moment. The Michael Duke Show continues. Common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. Let's do it.
buddy, put that thing back in its holster. We haven't gone anywhere.
I don't understand.
Check out the MichaelDukesShow.com for information on how to get access to the podcast.
Welcome to the party, pal.
The Michael Dukes Show.
The greed and the entitlement is astounding to me.
What more could you want from a low-budget radio program?
This is a dumpster fire.
That was just BS.
It is time to get a new perspective.
We know just what you need, and we've got just the cure. Open wide and prepare for a steaming hot cup of freedom.
I just don't fathom it.
The Michael Dukes Show, streaming live across the world.
Live around the world on the internet at michaeldukeshow.com, where you'll find links to the audio-only stream, the podcast, the Facebook pages, the YouTube channels, and, of course, live around the state of Alaska on this, your favorite radio station, and or FM translator. Good morning, my friends. How are you? It is the Michael Dukes Show, Wednesday edition of the show. We just finished up with Joshua McHoes, who has written the beginning of a good series of articles over on Substack. Our Article 1 is out right now, Part 1, and good looking out there. If you missed it, you can go back and listen to it on the podcast and hear all the discussion that we just had with Joshua. His writing is very concise and has got some deep thought attached to it, and I would encourage you to go out there and take a quick peruse through it. He says that the next article will hopefully be out at the end of the month. He said he's working on it today. So hopefully we'll see that article by the end of the week or first part of next week, and we can continue this discussion on where we're going as a state, because Alaska is at a crossroads. There's no doubt about it. Joining us in this hour is former state senator Mike Shower, who's coming on board to talk with us about his candidacy for lieutenant governor. He's running with Bernadette Wilson, and we're going to be talking with him about that here in just a hot second. Quickly, though, 27 degrees here on top of the world in Homer, Alaska, 16 degrees in Anchorage, 10 above in Fairbanks. It's like a tropical heat wave in Fairbanks right now, where they've got they're doing very well up there. Massive snow in Anchorage. That winter storm warning has finally gone away for the Kenai, but we're expecting essentially rain and snow today. It's all rain, snow, freezing rain, raining, freezing rain, rain and snow. I mean, that's kind of for the rest of the week. That's what it looks like for down here. So going to be a little greasy out there today. Just saying. Be very careful and cautious. And of course, if you're in Anchorage, you're dealing with 4 million pounds of snow, and so be prepared for some delays right there. And then we'll get into that. All right. Well, without further ado, let's jump into this here with State Senator Mike Shower, who is joining us right now. He's on the telephone. Let's see what Mike Shower has to say. And visit with him. Hello, my friend. How are you?
Good morning. I wasn't looking at your text because I was listening to you on the radio in the first hour of the program, and I was filling out my I'll just keep my opinion to myself, the APOC forms that I have to do, even though I'm no longer in the legislature, because you got to fill out your stuff,
right?
And tell everything about every dollar you've ever made and all that silliness. It's just kind of whatever. But yeah, so I was doing both of those, and I missed your text, and I'm like, I had to laugh because you're like, hey, are you gonna do the video thing? I'm like, Michael, have I ever done the video thing? Why would we change now?
You have done that. That's the thing. You have done the video thing, and I'm just, it's like you're special or something. I want you to get involved with the I want everybody wants to see your smiling face. That's what it's all about. Yeah. Well, State Senator Mike Shower continues with us here, and we are jumping into this. It's been a hot minute. In fact, it's been a while since we've had any gubernatorial or lieutenant gubernatorial candidates on. We did have Josh Church on earlier this week, but we're going to get into it. This is when this is going to be your busy season, right, Mike? I mean, this is where the rubber's going to start to meet the road, because you guys have got 7 months essentially until the primary, and so there's a lot of things happening right now.
Yeah, it is going to be the busy season. It got a little slow for Christmas holidays, as you would imagine. I mean, nobody wants to talk too much when we have politics or fundraising and all of that. And of course, you have a whole slew of legislators going down that, some of them probably don't even want to think about it. That you got to go pack up and go live for 4+ months down there in Juneau. However, like I said, it is going to become the busy season, because at some point here, there will be two things will happen, right? Well, we got 3 big ones, really. The first APOC report, speaking of APOC, coming up shortly, on fundraising and how different campaigns are doing. You're going to have some start to fall out at some point here, and you'll start seeing probably some consolidation, the handshakes that they'll say, well, I'll be your lieutenant governor if you, support me to run for governor, that kind of stuff, so you're going to see some of that probably. And then you're going to see some announcements, not even those that fall out, that are going to pick their lieutenant governor candidates, like you saw, recently. So you're going to start to see those things start to shake out as the fundraising success or not becomes apparent, and how campaigns are doing. So there's a lot in the next few months. It's going to be a busy season, although I anticipate a lot of that probably won't happen until April or May.
Right.
We'll see how it goes, but I think Bernadette being way out in front and picking the lieutenant governor early has put a little bit of pressure on some of them, because now people want to see, well, okay, well, Mike is on the campaign with Bernadette. We know what he brings and where he stands. Well, who are you going to pick? And so I think it was it's going to be interesting to watch that and see, how that plays out. So yeah, you're not wrong. It's going to be a busy time for sure.
How, and this is more personal because Mike and I are friends more than anything else, but how, you just mentioned, having to go away to Juneau for 4 months. How excited are you that you don't have to participate in the madness that is the session right now? How grateful are you? Give me your gratitude score on this right now.
We're 110. Is it possible to go past 100%?
I think so. Yeah. 110.
Yeah. 110. You've been there. I honestly, Michael, I mean, look, Michelle and I don't mind serving, or we wouldn't be here, and we certainly wouldn't be stepping back into the ring in a different race if we really didn't feel that this was important, because we all have lives to live. And Michelle and I love being here with our kids and our grandkids and things to do at home and being in our community. We love the Matsu. So, being gone for 4 months at a time is a strain. It's a financial strain. It's a stress, being away from family, all those issues. And so if you think about it, I mean, from the time I was 18 until 42, I wore the nation's uniform, and we traveled and were sent all over. And then I get a few years at home finally, to kind of just be a guy flying airplanes and doing stuff I love. And also I'm right back in, putting on a uniform essentially again for the last 8+ years. And so finally, Michelle and I are like, while we don't mind the serving part, the opportunity to not go to Juneau in the middle of the winter and play with all the drama and the games and the stuff that is taking place. Trust me, we were both like, it was almost like after so many years of doing it, a couple of weeks ago, we're like, there's like this stress building up. We're like, ooh, after Christmas, we're like, we got to do something. And then we're like, wait a minute, we don't really have to do anything. And it was like, all of a sudden, it's just like that big old gorilla just jumped off your back. And you're like, we don't have to pack. We don't have to plan. We don't have to do that. And it's like, woo, okay. So yeah, it's a nice feeling, man. It is. And I will add, while you're laughing, I'm getting calls from some of the, the legislators that I've known well and worked with. They're like, this is going on, that, and this thing. And you're like, hey man, I'm not there anymore. So sorry, I'll help you. I'm happy to do whatever I can, but advice or things may be happening, but it's funny because you can just hear it in their voice, the tension and, the stress that they're under. And I get it, it is. So yeah, we're happy to be home.
That's good. It's I'm glad for you. I'm glad that kind of weight is off your shoulder in that regard. Now, as I said, Mike and I have been friends for a long time. But Mike, I'm going to be a little hard on you today. I have some questions. I have some rather pointed questions, and because I've been watching some of these debates from around the state, and some of these discussions, the ones that have been streamed and everything else, I'm going to start with some pointed questions here. We got about 5 minutes, so I'm going to start with the first one. Now, you're a lieutenant governor candidate, not a governor candidate. I understand that. Your responsibility is primarily has to do with elections and the running of that and integrity and everything else. And we'll get into that here in a little bit. But I know that you have said in the past that you're going to take a pretty big position in this administration as far as advisory and things like that. So I got to ask you this question. What is, and this is basically a repeat of one of the questions that took place here in the Matsu here a couple of weeks ago. In the next 5 years, what are the biggest challenge? What is the biggest challenge or some of the biggest challenges that are facing the state from your perspective or the campaign's perspective? What are the biggest challenges that we're facing in this state for the next 5 years?
No, I'll say the same Bernadette's been saying, because we're aligned on these issues. And if we weren't, I wouldn't be on the campaign ticket, right, with her. So, because we had a lot of pre-discussion before Michelle and I ultimately made the decision to jump in. So you can assume we're aligned on the values and the big picture stuff, right? So there are things that you and I have talked about for some time that Bernadette's been talking about since, essentially since January of last year, when we started, talking to her, and then through her various videos and things she's pushing out. And it's not that there's any difference. I was busy being a legislator, and she's being she's running the campaign. So here's an answer of some of those issues, and none of these will be a surprise. Like I said, and to the point, people want to know, they can go look at Bernadette's, at the campaign website and all the videos and things she's putting out. I have a whole history of it. I don't necessarily need to do that. That, especially people on your program. So things like, for example, one of the things we still need, and we talk about it, and when I say we, I'm going to assume Bernadette, myself, and the campaign, right, positions, are a fiscal policy, right? Because we don't have it. How often have we kicked that drum or beat that drum here on this program? We must have a fiscal policy. It's going to have a spending cap if we're ever going to limit. You're going to have to do something with the PFD to lock it away and stop fighting over it and get that off the books. You're going to have something that reduces cost, and maybe ultimately you're going to need some kind of taxes. I hate the revenue word. I do. I'm just going to say taxes, and that may come in the form of, which I would prefer, something to point number 2 that's important for us. While we have a friendly administration in DC, is going to be resource development. Bernadette talks about it, relentlessly on the campaign trail. We have to develop our resources. You were talking about in the last segment, last hour, resource development. We need to be going full throttle on that. And I'm not saying we're not working on some of those things, like a gas line and other things, Ambler Road, MPRA, opening it up. We've got the West Assitna Road access out here to Gold and Antimony and other issues, logging coming back. There's so many things that we should be doing, as I've said on this program before, the Texas of the North, right? So talking about things that, Bernadette and I are completely aligned on, we have to get the state's fiscal house in order. And that kind of goes into the same point with resource development, to showing the companies and people and the billionaires, whoever they may be, that they want to invest in Alaska. Alaska needs to have a fiscal house that's in order. They have to plan on a 30, 40, 50-year cycle, not like, hey, what's Alaska going to do next year, right? You guys talked about that in the last segment. Like I said, I listened to it. So those are big issues, right? The cost of living up here is hurting people. Everybody knows it. When is a kid going to be, and I say a kid, a young adult, going to be able to afford a house? Not like you and I did, with the way things are going right now, with the lack of housing that is affordable, with the price of fuel, with the price of groceries. There are some things that we don't necessarily control with all of our, a lot of our goods coming up from the lower 48, but there are things we can do to try to help that. One of those is the cost of energy, right? I don't know if you got your gas bill. I just got mine for the month of December and January. I don't even know how to repeat what it is. I think I'm gonna have to take out a small loan for it. I got that yesterday. I'm like, holy moly, look at this thing. So those are big key issues, Michael. There's a lot of other touch points out there. Things like, I know, trolling, bycatch. Bernadette's been talking about that since last May or June, I think. Now some of the other candidates are talking about it, but those are important issues to many people. The comfish aspect of that. We have the influence of outside countries doing things, still trying to poke their nose in our business, especially on the defense side, right? Dan Sullivan with the big, beautiful bill, talking about investment in the state. Those are huge issues. We can't discount the federal government doing things in the state because they bring a lot of assets. And in the sense of, primarily, we're talking money, right? Milcon, military construction. They were talking about ADAC down the Aleutian chain, still talking about things on the northern slope of Alaska, as far as a deep water port or places where we might put basing. You've got the entire thing with the Golden Dome shield. I know there's a ha-ha thing about Greenland, but we're a part of that, a significant part. I mean, the investment they're talking about in Alaska is billions of dollars from the federal government, building ships and having more Coast Guard assets stationed here, which is going to be important with China and Russia and everything that's happening. I mean, Michael, like I said, I can sit here for 10 minutes, an hour probably, to start rattling off, but these are all big things that Bernadette has talked about. I will continue to talk about, that are important to us, but those are things that everybody knows matter, right? To the state. And if we boom, then it takes care of some of those things. Jobs become more available. good jobs that pay better so people can afford to live up here. And things will flow from that. And by the way, if we develop those resources, my friend, as you well know, that will equal, if it's done correctly, more tax revenue to the state that will help alleviate some of our problems. But you got to grow your way out of it. Ben Carpenter and you and I used to talk about this a lot.
Right.
The primary to grow your economy, and then you get the effect of that downstream.
Well, there has to be a growth in the economy, in the private economy for sure, because it's been ignored. But also there has to be, again, new taxes or revenue funding flowing into the government. But there has to be a limiter on that, and that's the problem that we have, is that as we get new revenue for the government in the form of taxes or fees or whatever, that new revenue is then just consumed. It's just, they're slurping it up as fast as it can come in, and that's one of the big problems. Now, I'm happy that you said that the top fiscal, or the top issue here, is a fiscal plan and the budget, because in some of these other challenges, that's not what we're hearing in these forums, and I don't know why that is, Mike. I don't know if the answer is tailored to the forums and what they want. But if a candidate, in my opinion, is not talking about the budget and the fiscal plan as the number one challenge and the number one thing that we should be focused on first and foremost, to me, I just don't see him as a serious candidate, because that everything else that everybody's talked about, affordability, cheap energy, homes, jobs, all this other kind of leadership, everything, that all comes back to it's all touched by the budget. We have to have a fiscal plan in place. 1 minute.
Including investment in the state. I will reiterate the point. If you don't have a solid and stable and sustainable fiscal plan, business owners and those that would otherwise invest in the state get very nervous about that. Bernadette and I have had many discussions about this. Think about this. She's a business owner in Anchorage, of all places, where good luck trying to, navigate that with the Anchorage Assembly and the far leftists in control of it, because they are. And so she has been learning how to navigate that world and having to run a business, write paychecks, make it work and survive in a very difficult environment. She gets it. So my point to all that is yes, at the top of somebody's mind that has never been in government service, has never been the politician having to do that, Bernadette has had to figure out how to run a business, make it profitable, make it work, and write checks. So at the top of her mind, of course, it's going to be the budget. We've had many discussions, and I know I had 60 seconds, so I'll cut it off quickly, is that a lot of our discussions center around how are we going to make this state work? And that's going to center, like you said, what does the governor do? One of the biggest things is the budget. It's got to work. So we talk about it a lot. We don't have enough time on this program to do it, but that is a top concern for us.
Yeah,
of course.
Mike Shower, candidate for lieutenant governor, is our guest. We're going to continue here, the Michael Dukes Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. We return with more right after this.
We're broadcasting live through a series of tubes,
allowing all of these entities to provide streaming stuff going on the internet.
Well, it's kind of hard to explain. Sorry. Streaming live every weekday morning on Facebook Live and MichaelDukesShow.com.
Okay, we're in the break. Mike Shower is our guest. Mike, again, we'll sidebar just a little bit here, and I'll vent a little bit to you, because again, I watched a lot. I've been watching these debates. I've been watching the commentaries and the play-by-plays that some of the news outlets have been putting on these debates and things like that, and I see a lot of discussion about a lot of different things. I see, talk about energy costs and housing affordability and jobs and all these other things, which in and of themselves are important issues. Don't get me wrong. I'm not sure the government has a role in fixing a lot of those things. I don't know if it's necessary. Those are mostly free market issues, in my opinion. Mm-hmm. But what I'm not seeing is a upfront, outright discussion of, guys, the house is on fire and we need to put it out. Guys, the fiscal cliff is coming and we've got to pull it on the brakes. I'm not seeing a lot of those discussions. I'm not seeing people bring that first. You did, which I applaud you for. But I mean, I'm not seeing that being first and foremost on candidates' lips. Is it because they're afraid that the constituency doesn't want to hear the fact that we're in a crisis and that it's going to get ugly? I mean, why are we not hearing this from candidates? I mean, again, I'm not running for anything, but if I was running for governor, I would be beating the hell out of this drum. Like, this is it. The one thing that's going to kill us is the budget. All these other things are important, but if we don't get this one thing taken care of, nothing else matters.
Well, look, I can tell you flat out, because you said, are they afraid to talk about it? I'll tell you right now, talking to Bernadette, she ain't afraid of nothing. Flat out. I mean, she is strong in her opinions and her positions on things, which is one of the things I like. There's no waffling with her. It's going to be decisions as governor go, we're going to do this, we're going to go there. I'm like, okay, I like that. That's leadership. I can deal with that, right? There's no hesitation whatsoever, which I think is important. But we do talk about it in ours. Now, why the candidate forums are doing this, I don't know. I can't answer that question as to why they're doing what they're doing. I know if you just let Bernadette go freeform, then she's absolutely going to talk about it. We've talked about it relentlessly at different campaign events we've been at. When it comes up, it's one of many topics we do. So at least from our perspective, our campaign, we understand that. Bernadette gets it. She's right on board with it, right? I said it's top of her mind. She is a business owner, has to make the checkbook balanced every month. So she understands that, and it kind of approaches it almost like, the current president does, whereas like a business, not like a government where you have unlimited tax revenue, right? Taxes, because you can just tax more. Think about it, right? Right now, we have a government that is taking what little is left of the permanent fund earnings and taking the permanent fund dividends so they can continue to pay for government without having to have the hard conversation with constituents about taxes, telling Alaskans, we got to tax you now to pay for your government, which might make them upset, right? Now we have the governor talking about taxes and other things coming out. So that's an important aspect of this, Michael, because right now it's easy to just take the PFD, but that road is coming to an end, and it's got a big old sign on it that says, bridge out ahead, stop, but they're not. They're talking about more education spending. They're talking about going back to defined benefits, which is going to cost us. And you and I look at that and we go, what? Bernadette, we're like, what? She's like, what? How are we doing that when we already know that we're approaching a fiscal cliff? And by the way, brother, last point, before we really get on it, let's talk about where oil's going right now with Venezuela and other things happening. If oil drops, as it seems like it's going to, this problem gets exponentially worse quickly for us, and nobody's talking about that.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. I mean, Trump wants to, he stated that he wants to push oil down for the rest of the country down to $50 a barrel. I mean, we know that's coming. We're already at 62. ANS this morning is at $61, $62. I mean, and if it gets down into the 50 territory, I mean, there's going to be, the crisis is just going to be exacerbated. And yet everybody's acting like, oh, all this new stuff, we're bringing the gas or new oil or whatever, that's going to save us. It's not. It's not. If the gas line gets built, great. If it doesn't, you can't count on it. It's if come. And if the price of oil gets way down there, you can't keep building budgets based on these rosy assumptions that we've been talking about. We got 10 seconds. We don't have time to respond. Sorry. We're going to come back to it here. Don't go anywhere. The Michael Dukes Show continues. Common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. Mike Shower is our guest. Let's get to it. Please like and share, follow, subscribe, ring the bell, do all the YouTube-y stuff. Come on, get to it. Here we go.
The Michael Dukes Show. Seriously humorous with a pinch of intellect. Sorry. That is humorous. Here's Michael Dukes.
Okay, we're continuing with Mike Shower, candidate for lieutenant governor. If you want to meet up with Mike Shower and Bernadette Wilson, candidate for governor, and Mike Shower for lieutenant governor, they've got a meet and greet tonight, 6 to 8 p.m. at Floater's Restaurant in Big Lake. That's where you can go out there. And then tomorrow, they're world travelers. Tomorrow, they're going to be in Kenai at Paradisios from 6 to 8. So 6 to 8 tonight in Wasilla at Floaters, 6 to 8 tomorrow night at Paradisios down on the Kenai. You'll have to tell me how the roads are, Mike. I'm worried about that. Anyway, let's get back to it. As lieutenant governor, you're going to be, you're really your sole constitutional task is taking care of the division of elections and overseeing elections and ballot measures and everything else. And of course, you've been fighting for election reform while you were in the legislature, you were fighting for election reform almost the whole time, with almost no traction from your fellow legislators or anybody else. What, as the lieutenant governor, what do you see being able to do in an administrative role versus a legislative role? What are the things you're going to be focused on? Let me know where you at.
Well, so a couple things here. First of all, I mean, my role, I anticipate in discussions with Bernadette, and she's open to it, and I think understands the role of a strong lieutenant governor that can execute on things, not just kind of be there. And that's not a critique on anybody, just, there's different roles that lieutenant governors play based on the governor and the relationship and what they plan to do. And so from my perspective, as you well know, elections is very important to me, and it's the primary thing I have worked on, and that's one of the reasons Bernadette wanted me to join the ticket, because she wanted somebody strong in that, and she knows that's important to a free republic, right? Having the ability to have free, fair, secure elections. So that matters to her a great deal. That happens to be my bailiwick, and there are others. I mean, let's give Sarah Vance a shout, Representative Vance from Homer. She's been doing a fantastic job, and frankly, she's the one having to carry the water right now because I'm gone. So she will, and she's been working side by side with me. So, I'm not the only one, but there's just very few that have taken on the entire mantle. It was me in the Senate and Sarah in the House, and that was kind of it, right? So she's doing a great job with it right now. Already spoken to her about things that are in place still this year. So that will be primarily number one. Now, I am not going to give away the farm on everything that can be done. And I'll tell you why, because I've already seen it starting to happen, where other candidates and their teams start to take your positions on things when you say it all.
Right.
And
right.
Nobody knows what I do about everything that can be done via fiat, i.e. policy and regulation. And I'm not about to put that out there for everybody to see it, but I know what it is, and it's plenty. And almost all those things have not been done that could be done. So that's almost day one, right? Coming in with EOs, for lack of a better, term, and saying we're going to do this, and we're not going to do that, and we're out of this, and there's a host of things. And
well,
you and I have discussed it kind of.
Then tell me. I understand not giving away the farm or giving away strategy, but tell me, what are the biggest issues facing Alaska as far as elections and election integrity and everything else is that? I mean, even like we see now that there's a lawsuit. We're going to talk about this tomorrow. There's a lawsuit fighting back against the ranked choice voting petition. Kathy Giesel and company is leading a charge to try and get it thrown out through language changes and things like that. But tell us about some of the big challenges that Alaska is facing in the election. Outline the problems for us if we can't go into the solutions.
Well, ranked choice voting is one of them, right? I contend, I still say one of the most important things the state needs to do is repeal ranked choice voting in November. Maybe over every other thing, who the governor is, who the legislators are. If ranked choice voting is defeated, it's gone, that's going to change the dynamics, right? Because there are a number of legislators that get elected that otherwise wouldn't. You just named the name of one of them that wouldn't be sitting in office right now if there was no ranked choice voting, including maybe in higher level offices, would not be sitting in the seats right now. And they know it, so they're desperately going to fight it. It's the same names, the same people. There's no surprise there. So that is certainly one of the things that needs to be done. But I'll give you an example of ranked choice voting and how it works, right? Let's go back to automatic voter registration. Right now, as I have highlighted before, one of those problems is that continues to put a whole lot of people on the voter rolls that should not be there and eventually get removed and are not eligible for a PFD, but they in essence become just de facto put on the voter rolls. That's a nightmare. Cleaning that up. That's something that could be done via regulation and policy, things that we can be doing to stop that. There's a host of things, and again, not getting into, nor do we have time for it, kind of technical, but we found out a whole lot of problems with that. That should be fixed, should have been fixed. It isn't, as far as I know. So there is a host of things like that, Michael. Voter roll, we have the worst in the nation. We know it. It's acknowledged. Nobody argues that. So that's one of the areas we need to clean up on. And that's what one of the things Sarah and I were working on last year on a bill to have that voter roll cleanup, right? So there's issues like that. Organizations were a part of a whole lot of things. Like, so we could spend a whole hour on it anyways, but there's a number of issues. And if people want to go back and look at chalk talks I've had with the whiteboard and our previous programs, you can. We've highlighted many of these before. So there's one of the biggest ones, ranked choice voting, and then what that does, things like automatic voter registration. There's a couple for you right off the bat.
It's yeah, these are big issues. And again, because I think Alaska's at 106, 108% of their voter rolls definitely needs to be cleaned up. And yet here we are 10 years in, still having the same problems and still having the same discussions. We need somebody who's going to go in there and make that happen. And that's what we're looking for on that. You've mentioned a couple other things, when we were talking about budget, obviously budget being the number one issue, you say, of your campaign, which is good to hear, because again, we're not really hearing many other people talking about that as the number one issue, everything else flowing from that issue. And that leads us to what you just mentioned earlier, where, we're already seeing calls for more school funding. We're already seeing calls for going back to defined benefits. We're seeing calls to offer incentives and to drop royalties and to lose revenue from these various things, whether it's the kitchen lights unit or whether it's the AKLNG property taxes or whatever. I mean, these all go back again, fold back into the budget. Give us your positions on some of these different things with the spending on education while not getting a better outcome or the defined benefits. Give us your thoughts on that.
Be quick, because then I know we're at our 30 minutes on my phone, and I have my the team. I made my promise, as you and I. It's a little unusual for us to be out after 30 minutes, but I know that's what they want on the moving things along. So I'll do that in the 1 minute wrap up period and move on without having you be too mean to me, because it's
Right.
just how we're doing business. But so you mentioned two, so I'll answer those two. So yes, on the education spending, Bernadette's been real clear on this, Michael. It's not so much the number per se, but it is the outcomes, right? I've rarely heard people say they're not willing to spend money on education. What I've heard people say consistently is that they want to see that we have good outcomes for it, right? And so far, we're not achieving those numbers. That's not equal. Every school system, every school district is not the same. Some are doing great, charter schools and other things, magnet schools, some of them aren't. And that's something that needs to be looked at, because we have a very big state with a lot of unique challenges, like far-flung villages and things that are tough. So it's a unique problem, but it certainly matters, right? And, if you get back to things like defined benefits, well, my position is clear. We can't afford it. And as I've said before, if we're not still paying for the expensive tier 1 and 2, very lucrative former retirement system that we had, then we could have the best defined contribution in the entire country.
Right.
That's verified from talking to various ARM board members. So I know that there's going to be a push for that again, and that's more of a payoff from certain legislators making promises to their union folks and others that they want to go back to that. But the reality is, Michael, it's just more money we don't have, and we need to do better than that. And there are things we can clean up we don't have time to talk about today, things I was working on and others. So all of this at the end of the day folds back to, I'll finish with this, and then I'll bow out for now until the next chance we talk. But all of this, as you see, folds back to the fiscal policy, right? Bernadette gets it. She's a business owner, has to make it work, and she understands that, as do I. So the team will be focused on things and looking at going, if you can't balance the books, don't come to us with a spending package. And by the way, if you're going to push a spending package, you need to show us how you're going to get that money.
Right.
And where it's going to come from. Have that hard conversation with the Alaskans and tell them you're going to take the rest of the PFD. Tell them you're going to tax them to be able to spend this money, because that's ultimately what it is, right? They're going to have to spend the money. They're going to have to get the taxes from somewhere. They need to start doing that as opposed to just the easy answer of taking the PFD, because that battle's been ongoing for a decade. So it all circles back, a lot of it, to the budget. We certainly understand that as a team. And there's my answer on your two things. And before I exceed my limit too far, I better bow out, my friend, because I think we're about 32 minutes into it. I know we started a little late, so I didn't mind going past the 7:30, but I got to live in my handshake, because I'm not it's a team. It's not just you and me like it used to be. It was a little easier, but I have to stick inside the rules of moving to the next one.
All right. If you want to meet with Mike and Bernadette tonight, 6 to 8 p.m. at Floater's Restaurant in Wasilla. Tomorrow, 6 to 8 p.m. at Paradisios down in Kenai. And folks can go out there and do it. Mike Shower, thank you so much for coming on board. And we'll talk to you next time.
It's great, Michael. I missed this. Let's do this more often. Get in touch with the team, get me on board, because I love talking about these things and getting in touch with people. So great to see you guys this morning. Y'all take care. We'll be in touch.
Thanks so much, Mike Shower, our guest here. The Michael Duke Show, Common Sense, Liberty-Based, Free Thinking Radio. I got a cleanup segment up next. We're gonna talk. Back with more right after this.
Listened to by more staffers in Juneau than any other show. because their bosses told them to. And after what they just heard, oh man, they're going to be pissed.
You're a bad, bad man.
The Michael Dukes Show.
Okay. I'm a little frustrated. I won't lie. I'm a little frustrated. I'm a little frustrated by the handling. And look, I don't want to stretch this too far because I don't want to burn any bridges and everything else. But you know what Alaskans need? They need more long form discussions on these things. We need to talk more about what's happening. We and gating the guest. And we saw this with Dunleavy, right? Dunleavy promised to appear on the show every couple months and come on board and have a discussion. And in the beginning, the governor would come on for an hour and we'd talk about things. And it was always a great discussion. Always got the deep dives. We got some good points in. We're able to, take a point and expand on it if we needed to, because we had the time to do it. And then as the interviews got further and further apart, and as we got further on down the road, they started to gate it. Oh, you can only have 20 minutes. You can only have one side. And at one point, I think the last interview that we had with the governor, it was like 12 minutes. 12 minutes. And it was really only to talk about the one thing that the governor wanted to talk about. And I hate that. I hate that. Because the way we get the right answers is to be able to dive down and to pick through people's comments and their responses and be able to take it where the conversation flows. I mean, quite honestly, that's why people like Joe Rogan have just exploded and blown up amazingly, is because he has these long, these are 3-hour discussions, right? With these people. These are deep dives. These are not sound bites. And in all honesty, I set this interview up with Mike Shower like 4 weeks ago. And I totally forgot that she told me that I could only have him for 30 minutes. Probably because it just irritates me. And I put it off the Sean Ryan show, Joe Rogan show. These are, again, these long form podcasts. That's what people want to hear. People, and I think if you look at the podcast consumption over the last few years, you'll see you'll see that most of the more popular podcasts are almost always long form. They're not the 7-minute segment you see on Fox News or CNN where they bring a talking head in or a politician in and they talk to him for 7 or 8 or 9 minutes, 12 minutes, because you just can't get down into the details of it. And it just irritates me, man. It just irritates me. Again, this is not on Mike. Like he said, he made a handshake deal. He's got to follow his handshake. He's got to do it. He's got to. But I want. Well, if there are handlers out there listening, if there are campaign people out there listening who are scheduling and talking about things and doing all this, you guys are doing yourself a disservice. If somebody wants to give your candidate a chance to be on the air for an exorbitant amount of time, 1 hour, which is, 47 minutes or whatever in actual talk time. If somebody wants to give you that out there for you to chance for your candidate to be able to, put their information out, then you should let them. You should let them instead of gating it down. I don't understand that. It's frustrating. Yeah, no, I mean, the governor, that again, I don't know why I'm disappointed, because it happens all the time. You ask candidates, will you come back on? Oh, of course I'll come back on. Of course I'll come back on. And then, they do once, maybe twice, and then it just disintegrates and goes away. And you're like, my buddy John Reeves over at the Boneyard says he's been on the Joe Rogan podcast 3 times, and it's a great 3 hours of conversation that goes by too quick each time. Yeah. Go watch John's interviews on Rogan. Those are exciting and interesting. All right, here we go.
The Michael Duke Show. Not your daddy. Wait, sorry. Not your daddy? Ooh, not your daddy's talk radio. Huh. Whew. I was scared for a second. Thought we were going down. Here's Michael Dukes and the show.
So I'm I was a little heated coming out of that interview, not because of Mike, but because I was gated by his by the campaign to where I could only have him for 30 minutes. And I pressed the envelope. I obviously pressed the envelope out there to where we got him for 33 minutes, okay? Or whatever it was, 30, 32, 33 minutes. And, he'd made a promise and to his people, and so he had to fulfill it. But I don't know why candidates and their handlers do this. We were just talking during the break about things like the Joe Rogan podcast, right? The Joe Rogan podcast is, in my opinion, just my humble opinion, wildly popular because it allows people to get down into the weeds to see where the conversation goes. I think that the people of this generation, as things change and the way we've consumed media has changed, have finally, thank you God, started to move away from a lot of that soundbite mentality. Because there was a time when, remember when Twitter was restricted to 148 characters or whatever it was? Remember that? We've come to a time where people are more interested in some of the details and getting down into it. You've got Joe Rogan, you've got the Sean Ryan podcast, you've got a lot of these bigger podcasts where they sit there and for 2 or 3 hours they talk in deep dives, and they go where the conversation takes them. And maybe that's the problem. Maybe it's not just, I'm not trying to pick on Mike's campaign people, because I've seen this happen before. I remember we had Governor Dunleavy when he was first running for office, and we had him on the program, and we had him on the program several times in pretty rapid succession. And they were always a good 1 hour conversation, right? A good 1 hour, which is, an hour in radio, especially on a talk station, is like 46 minutes of actual talk time, right? But we'd have these really good discussions. And of course, the same question that I would ask every politician: are you willing to come back on every couple months to sit down with us once you get into office and talk about these things? Oh, yes, of course. Oh, yes, of course. And, and that just slowly fades away, where the interviews get further and further apart. And with Dunleavy, for example, It got to the point where I think the last 4 or 5 interviews that I had with him, each one kept getting progressively shorter. Oh, you can have him for 30 minutes. Oh, you can have him for 20 minutes. The last time I had the governor on, I think it was 12 minutes that I had with him. And he already had a talking point that he wanted. He had a thing that he wanted. They're using me to talk about the one thing that he wanted, not allowing me to ask questions, not allowing me to get down into the weeds on it, to get into the details, to talk about. No, you can't do that. And that just pisses me off, because how in the world are we going to understand the complexities of what we're doing with government and everything else if we can't have a deeper conversation about it? That just blows my mind. I mean, and yeah, there's still a bit of a soundbite mentality out there with reels and YouTube shorts and everything else where you get a minute to but we need to be able to dive down into these issues. And this goes back to the deeper thing that I was talking about earlier with Mike, where you go to these candidate forums or whatever. And let me just clarify here something that this is the Alaska Young Republicans State Convention back on the 10th, when they had, what did they have? They had 10 of the 12 Republican candidates on stage. And the first question that they asked them after the introduction, the first question that they asked them was, what is the biggest challenge Alaska faces in the next 5 years? So I essentially paraphrased that question to Mike, right? And Mike's answer was fiscal plan and the budget. Now, I'm not going to say that Mike, I'm not going to say that he crafted that answer for this show specifically, because Mike and I have known each other for a long time, and we've constantly talked about that, right? But all the candidates that answered that question, and the worst part was this Young Republicans forum, I don't know who was running it, but why you wouldn't ask that question to every candidate up there. They only asked it to, they broke the questions up into various candidates were answering different questions. So they only asked the question to Shelley Hughes, Adam Crum, Craig Taylor, and Bernadette Wilson. But when they asked them, what is the biggest challenge Alaska faces in the next 5 years? Here's what Natalie Spaulding over at Must Read said. Shelley Hughes identified affordability as the biggest challenge Alaska faces. She talked about the need for cheap energy and affordable homes and job opportunities, especially for people on Medicaid. What? I mean, this is the number one. This is the biggest challenge that Alaska faces in the next 5 years. Not one word about budgets, revenues, and not even resource development, which is my most hated go-to for new revenue discussion. Oh, resource development, we'll just do. But again, cheap energy, affordable homes, and jobs. How is that? That's not really even government's responsibility, any of those things. Okay? Especially jobs and affordable homes. That's not a governmental function. Adam Crum also identified affordability as the biggest challenge, but focused his answer on the problem of high energy costs. Again, what is the only thing that you could say that government has to do with affordable energy or high energy costs is to get the regulatory hurdles out of the way. Craig Taylor agreed with Hughes and Crum on the need for affordability and reliability, but added that lack of infrastructure and dwindling workforce are among the top challenges Alaska faces. Again, it wasn't the top. What is the biggest challenge Alaska faces in the next 5 years? Cheap energy, affordable homes, job opportunities, high energy costs, and now lack of infrastructure and dwindling workforce? What's the commonality in all these answers? I'm just asking. Does it have anything to do with economic stability? Does it have anything to do with budgets and a fiscal plan? Isn't that the root of all these things? And then Bernadette identified a lack of leadership to be the biggest challenge Alaska faces in the next 5 years, that no amount of problem identifying and problem solving will mean anything without an effective leader. Well, that's true that without an effective leader, but that's the biggest challenge? With all due respect to Bernadette, that's the biggest challenge. She didn't answer with what Mike just answered to. Now, again, I don't know if this answer was crafted specifically for the show. I don't think so, because again, Mike and I have talked about this ad nauseum for years. But why is that not the first words off people's lips when they come into this? Is it because they're afraid that they'll alienate somebody, because they're afraid that the electorate won't want to hear the bad news that we're in a crisis, that the is these people, man, just. And so between that and now the gating of the candidates, where they can only talk for 7.3 minutes. At the 17-minute mark, you need to bow out. Why? What? Why? And again, why wouldn't you want to have the opportunity, if you've got free airtime, to come out and talk about things and answer questions? Somebody said, well, but there's rules on how. Look, the rules do not apply to interview and news programs where we're not hyping and rah-rahing. We're asking questions. And everybody is welcome on this program. I don't care if you are a Republican, if you're a Democrat, if you're a socialist, if you're whatever. As long as you're willing to come on the question and answer, and come on the show and answer questions, you're welcome to come on. This is it's just frustrating to watch. It really is frustrating to watch. So, a word to the wise and all you handlers out there. Maybe loose the reins a little bit. Maybe loose the reins just a little bit. All right. We got to go. Thanks for coming on board and joining us. Tomorrow is Thursday. I think we're going to have Ben Carpenter on. Don't quote me on that quite yet. We'll see. But we are going to be talking about this ranked choice voting repeal tomorrow, as well as some other stuff. The Michael Duke Show, common sense, liberty-based, free thinking radio. Be kind, love one another, live well. Brian said, note to self, deferred maintenance and gate politicians. Apparently, it's the two things that drive me over the edge. That's the thing. I mean, yes, it does just irritate me to the point of, it irritates me to the point of frothing at the mouth frustration. Yeah, is Mike running for office, or are his handlers running for office? Maybe they're just smarter than me and know that they shouldn't, we shouldn't have him on there too much. We might give too much away. Jesus, you people. All right, I gotta go. I'm gonna go take a nap. We'll see you guys later. Be kind, love one another, live well.
We've shed our terrestrial radio skin, and now we are slimy lizard internet people. It's the Michael Duke Show.